Hi everyone, this is Samarah, and this is going to be a beautiful message from Mother Mary for the fall equinox and the new moon and the new time that we're moving into. I know that many of us are going through some things. In fact, I've got some folks gathered here who have some questions. So I'm going to take the first question and see what Mother Mary has to say.
The world today seems very negative. You can't turn on the news without seeing some kind of disaster or tragedy. How do we deal with that?
Well, first of all, darling, you have to realize that everything that's happening in the world right now could be said to resemble emotional weather. And so many of the tragedies and the structures that are going on right now are as if we've sort of moved into emotional meltdown. An emotional meltdown essentially happens when people are not living according to their personal, what I'll call integrity. Now, integrity is a word that's often used, but you don't always remember that integrity is spiritual integrity as well as moral integrity. And so if you're living a life that is not in keeping with who you really are, the emotional turbulence that gets stirred up becomes acted out in the world stage. So the first resolution to that is, I guess, what Jesus said: become as a little child. To move back into that innocent, move back into that place of wonder and joy in your own life. So if the only thing you can be grateful about is the bowl of soup you have for dinner, be grateful you have a bowl of soup for dinner and enjoy it and eat it with great gratitude. Part of what begins to happen is everything that you focus on expands and grows. So if you would like to have more joy and more tenderness and more peace, you begin by creating that in as many small ways in your own life as you can. That's the first thing, because your presence is your present. What you are living in terms of your own body and your own being, is your presence. So if it is already turbulent, and then you read something or see something on the news, the turbulence spills out in some sort of reaction. If you're peaceful, because you've done what you needed to do, now what you do when you see something on the news or you hear about something, you quiet yourself for just a moment and you send forth the most loving prayer you know. And it can be of any characteristic, any type that feels right to you. There is no right or wrong way to pray, as long as you're praying that all beings have peace, that all beings have enough to eat, that all beings find a way in themselves to experience God or Spirit or Allah or Buddha, whichever it would be. So it's very important not to react, because the escalation that you see in the world right now has come because each time someone does something that is destructive or disturbing, the next person amps it up and then amps it up and amps it up and amps it up, and now you have chaos, which is what is occurring. So all of you that have this as a concern, step 1, come to peace. Step 2, offer up a prayer in whatever manner is in your heart. And then the third thing, yes, there's a third thing, is to begin to find the people in the world who are creating constructive, exciting, wonderful, ecologically sound projects. And that will become part of your good news. That will become part of what you now offer your support to in whatever way feels right for you. And so you can't really dismantle the chaos by going at it head to head. You can't. But as you begin to create a different vibration, a different experience, and ultimately a different world, the chaos will diminish step by step. And more people will say, what are they doing over there? I want to move and see and have what they're doing. Beautiful question. Beautiful question. I think we have time for at least one more. Does anyone have another question?
I have a question. There's been a lot of people that has spiritual experiences, but they're afraid to come out and talk about it or tell anybody about it.
This is a wonderful question because, again, most of the world right now is locked into the idea that what's on the news is normal and what is the reality. And that is often difficult and rather challenging to say you've had an encounter, a heavenly encounter with someone. So a couple of things that you can do. Number one, if you yourself have had one, and I know you've had more than one, as it feels appropriate, you go first. Because what you find is that if you're daring enough to share that tender experience, you know, again, not necessarily in the supermarket, but perhaps yes, perhaps in the supermarket, what happens is more often than not, someone else will say, oh, if you have felt to share that with them, chances are either they themselves or someone they know has had a similar experience. And we know that our beloved Mary Elizabeth has started a wonderful radio show called Heavenly Encounters. And for those of you that are curious about that, it's on Blog Talk Radio. And as you know, Samarah is also on Blog Talk Radio, and you can get the information. But look for that one, because Mary Elizabeth is bringing people on the show that have had heavenly encounters to talk about it, and the viewers can make that tender step forward, you know, to either email or write in, or even just to know that they're not alone. Because so many people stay kind of locked in this prison of their own making, believing that what they have experienced, no one else would believe them, no one else has had that experience, and no one else would be trusted to hear them. So if you go first, chances are they will be very, very appreciative. Well, perhaps there's time for one more.
What happens when we die?
I love this question. I love this question. You come home. You know, so many of you are afraid of dying. I want to tell you with all my heart, it is never a punishment. It is a promise that we are always waiting for you, ready to hold you and embrace you. For some who've had some confusion about the earth journey, there's a whole series of rooms, we'll call them rooms, that you get to experience and have time to look at your life and perhaps come to peace with it. If you've never had an awakening in your spiritual life and you die, there's a lot that didn't make sense. There's perhaps still a lot that doesn't make sense. But what happens in those rooms is you have a chance to be reacquainted with what happened and why. And also perhaps, were there any other options at the time? So there's a series of very gentle things. It's a little like the Panama Canal. You have to go through these various locks, right? When you go take a ship through the Panama Canal, it can't go from here to there, so it goes through several times. And it's a little bit like that in heaven. We bring you through various places to understand and come to peace with your life. And then once you have, you get to pick. Do you want to come back? Do you want to return to this earthly realm and have another go at it. Some do, and some don't. Some don't. For instance, there's a whole group that you may believe died too young, of young men. And they wanted to work from the other realms to be able to change really the nature of what it means to be a man. And so people like John Kennedy, and then Kennedy Jr., John Denver, John Lennon, lots of our Johns, decided that rather than continue to do what they were doing on Earth, they would join with us and form a team. And if you look back now, over, let's say, roughly 2 decades since some of them have been gone, more in some cases, less than others, look at the young fathers today. Look at the young fathers today who are so tender with their children, who think nothing of changing diapers and doing all the various things to be with their children. This was an assignment that many took on in heaven, and rather than reincarnate, that's what they did. And so there's many different jobs in heaven. As I said, some come back and some stay with us. But my promise to you is there's a place for all of you. And so on this beautiful fall equinox of 2014, I want to say thank you, and thank you. Because I'm here, and yet without all of you who are creating beauty and sharing joy and being kind and sharing love, my message would keep falling on deaf ears. So thank you for listening. Namaste.